Have you ever wondered, how big is FF7's Meteor? Final Fantasy VII's Meteor is the true in-game boss. Because at the end of the day, it doesn't really matter if Sephiroth lives or dies. Once the Black Materia is cast, you still have a huge rock barreling towards the planet that you eventually still need to deal with. So how big is FF7's Meteor? And what kind of destruction could a meteor of its size actually accomplish? Before we get started, it should be noted that in both Final Fantasy VII Remake and Rebirth, we get to see the meteor during the final boss battles against Sephiroth. However, the size of the meteors changes between the two games, with Rebirth's version being significantly larger. And just for some perspective, the size of this meteor found in Remake is only roughly about 655 feet in diameter.
Ooh, that's kind of small.
So when you compare the size of this meteor to other areas within Remake, you can quickly see that this version isn't very menacing at all. Now compare this meteor size to Rebirth's. If you're new to this channel, to get our measurements, we'll be using a tool called Universal Engine Unlocker, which allows us to move characters around freely in world space. And as we move in any given direction, we are given the distance we travel in centimeters. So we'll start by placing Cloud directly at the bottom of the meteor, and then record the distance it takes to reach the top. So our grand total came out to about 121,000 centimeters, which is about 3,970 feet, or about 1.2 kilometers tall. And just for some perspective, the gold saucer here is only about 975 feet, or 297 meters. The next measurement that we need is the width of our meteor. While this isn't a perfect circle, we can use the width and height to estimate the overall volume and density later on. The total width of our meteor came out to about 160,500 centimeters. That puts the total length just under 1 mile at 5,265 feet, or 1.6 kilometers. And with this, we can start diving into the fun stuff. We can now estimate the mass and density of our meteor to estimate what its possible destructive impact might be. And even though this is a small meteor when compared to the likes of the Chicxulub asteroid, remember, size doesn't always matter, because sometimes it's all about how you use it. Speed matters, and sometimes the angle too. And in terms of asteroids, this can make or break an extinction level event. To best calculate our destruction, we really need to know 3 things: the meteor's volume, density, and mass. But mass requires us to know its volume and density first. So let's start things off by calculating the volume. To accurately estimate the volume, we need to use what's called the spherical cap formula. And I'll spare you the boring details, but basically, our meteor is an imperfect sphere with a portion cut off the top. So we use this formula to calculate the missing cap's volume, and then we subtract that from the total volume we would have had if this was a complete sphere. So in total, this meteor contains a little under 65 billion cubic feet of material. And while that's not quite as big as your mom, it's still pretty big. Now let's move on to density. So according to NASA, there are 3 main types of asteroids. You have C, S, and M types, with M type being the most dense, being composed mostly of iron and nickel, whereas your C and S type asteroids are composed of lighter materials, which wouldn't cause as much damage on impact. So I think if Sephiroth were given the choice of which kind of meteor to summon with his black materia, he's probably going to choose an M type, because, well, he's kind of an asshole. Since we know which elements to use, let's find out our mass. While the data is sparse, it's estimated that M-type asteroids are comprised anywhere between 30 to 90% iron and nickel, with iron being the most common element between the two. So we'll make an assumption on the higher end that this meteor is composed of 70% iron, 20% nickel, and 10% of other silicate materials. So iron has a density of 7.87 grams per cubic centimeter, while nickel has a density of 8.9 grams per cubic centimeter. And for simplicity, we'll say our silicate materials are made up of pyroxene and olivine, which have a density of about 3.2 grams per cubic centimeter. So we find the mass by taking volume times density, and that gets us a little under 13.5 billion metric tons, which is about 30 trillion pounds. And still isn't quite as big as your mom, but it's within 5 or 10 pounds, give or take.
Wow!
So now, we can try figuring out what kind of destruction this meteor is capable of. I found a website that looks like it came straight from the early 2000s, but it calculates meteor impacts on Earth and puts the results on a map. They even have documentation that describes the math that they use and how this program calculates its results.
Holy crap! That's a lot of information.
So all we have to do is plug in the information that we calculated from earlier to see our results. With a maximum impact speed of 72 kilometers per second, the resulting collision with Earth would cause an impact crater of about 45 miles wide and a little over half a mile deep. The resulting fireball would then expand out to about 1,189 miles, with ejected material reaching distances out to 1,880 miles or more. After seeing these results, I attempted to recreate our meteor in Universe Sandbox. And while it's not exactly one-to-one due to some limitations, it shares the same mass and density from earlier. The meteor composition is missing nickel because it's not an option, so I had to make silicates make up the missing 20% in density. So after making this meteor, I hurled it in-game at the same location on our website's map, at 72 kilometers per second, just to see what the results would be. While the resulting fireball wasn't something I could accurately measure in-game, the ejecta was, with a lot of the material landing approximately where the website predicted. So I think that's close enough for government work. I also compared the crater size in-game to what was predicted on the website, and it looks about the same too. So I think the math is mathing here. Now earlier, I did say that speed matters, especially when it comes to meteors and their total destruction potential. If we look at the original game's meteor fall event, we can see that this meteor is hardly moving at all. And while it's great for dramatic effect, this isn't exactly going to be some world-ending event. I mean, Midgar's going to get absolutely wrecked under 30 trillion pounds of rock, but most likely, all the other areas will be just fine. So if the Black Materia's sole purpose is to end the world, what kind of speed would this meteor need to impact with? If we jump back into Universe Sandbox and set our meteor speed to about 15,000 kilometers per second, or about 5% the speed of light, we could end FF7's world if it was about the size of the United States. That seemed to work quite well. But what if FF7's world was the size of our own planet? Well, this meteor would have to be going about 1.5 times the speed of light.
No, 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 no! Wait!
And all that's left after that is just a husk of a planet, just like the Gi wanted. So let's recap. Our meteor's height is about 3,970 feet, or about 1.2 kilometers tall. Our width is about 5,265 feet, or about 1.6 kilometers wide. And its theoretical weight could exceed over 30 trillion pounds, or about 13.5 billion metric tons. And just for fun, if we wanted to see how many clouds it would take to span across the whole meteor, it would take about 700 clouds vertically and 928 horizontally. And if we include Cloud My Pet Cockatiel, it would take about 3,781 clouds vertically and 5,015 horizontally. Now I did make this video just before the announcement of Final Fantasy VII Revelation, and after watching the trailer, it's quite possible the size of this meteor is going to change between Rebirth and Revelation. So I might need to make a follow-up video to this one once the game is out in our hands. So I'm excited to see what they do. And with that, thank you all so much for watching. If you enjoyed the video, give it a like and consider subscribing. It helps the channel grow and shows me that you may like to see more content like this in the future. And what do you think? Will the meteor in Revelation be the same size or larger than the one depicted here in Rebirth? Leave a comment to let me know. And I want to give a huge shout out to the Open FF7 Remake Discord community, especially this person, because they were able to provide me with a mod to spawn in the meteor with all of its fancy effects. So, thank you, you're awesome. And so are the rest of you guys. You're awesome too. So you all take care of yourselves. Bye for now.